The laughter around the banquet hall swelled, bouncing off the high ceilings and glistening chandeliers. The scent of roses, champagne, and vanilla-scented candles lingered heavily in the air. Yet, as I scanned the lavish setup, the perfectly laid tables, the towering cake, the white lilies cascading down the centerpiece, I felt nothing but numbness. My name tag was nowhere to be found. My chair, gone. "Oops," my sister-in-law Amber said with a mock-apologetic smile. "Guess we miscounted." The entire bridal party burst into laughter, their voices sharp and piercing like broken glass. Amber, dressed head to toe in Vera Wang, barely hid her smirk as she pointed toward the corner. "You can sit at the kids' table, Jess. Should be more your speed." Even my brother Ethan chuckled nervously. His eyes darted around the table, avoiding mine, but doing nothing to stop the humiliation playing out. He just adjusted his tie and shifted awkwardly in his seat like he hadn't been my best friend for most of my life. I stood frozen for a heartbeat too long, blinking away the sting in my eyes. My throat tightened, but no tears came. Not in front of them. Not today. Instead, I inhaled slowly, letting the humiliation settle into resolve. Then, calmly, I replied, "It does indeed seem that I'm not family." The words came out smooth, controlled, far from the storm raging inside me. I turned and walked away, heels clicking steadily against the marble floor. I could almost hear Amber's smug giggle following me like a shadow. What none of them knew was that, unlike them, I hadn't come to this wedding just to play the good sister. I came prepared. You see, months earlier when Ethan first told me he was getting married, I was genuinely happy for him. I'd spent years watching him drift from one shallow relationship to another, rarely opening up to anyone. Then came Amber, wealthy, poised, charming to outsiders, and downright cruel behind closed doors. I saw it. Everyone saw it. But Ethan was blind to it. When he asked me to help with the wedding planning, I jumped in like I always did. I wasn't just Ethan's sister. I was also one of the top event coordinators in Chicago. I'd built my business from the ground up, earning the trust of some of the city's wealthiest families. I knew the best vendors, the hidden gems for venues, the caterers who could make filet mignon melt like butter. But as the planning progressed, I started noticing subtle changes. Amber grew increasingly dismissive of me. Meetings I was supposed to attend were suddenly rescheduled. Decisions were made without me. Invitations sent without my review. It was clear. I was being phased out. Still, I told myself it was stress. That Amber was just anxious about the big day. That Ethan would come around. I was wrong. 2 weeks before the wedding, I overheard Amber whispering to her bridesmaids during a cake tasting. "She's so desperate to be included," Amber said, laughing softly. "It'll be fun to put her in her place at the wedding." My blood ran cold. I wanted to confront Ethan then and there, but I didn't. Instead, I began preparing for a different kind of performance. Not as the dutiful sister, as something else entirely. Back at the venue, I slipped into the staff hallway, my breathing shallow but controlled. I pulled out my phone and opened the event management app I'd used for the entire wedding. The app they thought was just for scheduling, but was actually much more. I had full control. Amber and Ethan never bothered to change the permissions after they froze me out. They never thought they needed to. I glanced at the clock. 1 hour. That's how long I had before the wedding fully kicked into motion. It would be enough. As I stood alone beneath the glow of an emergency exit sign, I realized something. They had planned to humiliate me. They had planned for me to be the outcast. But I had planned too. And when the time came, they would finally learn the difference between someone you exclude and someone you underestimate. It wasn't always like this. If you had told me 3 years ago that my own brother would sit quietly while his wife humiliated me, I would have laughed. Ethan wasn't just my brother. He was my person. The one who stayed up with me all night after Dad died. The one who snuck me into concerts when I was too young. The one who promised, after every failed relationship of his, that nothing would ever come between us. But Amber did. I met her for the first time at Ethan's birthday dinner. She was breathtaking, I won't lie. the kind of woman who commands attention just by walking into a room. But beneath the designer dress and sparkling jewelry, there was something else. Something sharp in the way she looked at people. Or rather, looked through them. From the beginning, Amber saw me as competition, not family. I saw it in the tight smiles, the dismissive comments she slipped in when Ethan wasn't listening. "Oh, you still rent that little apartment, Jess? That's cute." Or, "Ethan tells me you're some kind of party planner? How fun." Ethan brushed it all off. "You're just not giving her a chance," he'd say. "She's nervous, trying to impress you." But the longer they were together, the more I was pushed aside. Weekly dinners turned into monthly coffee dates. Private conversations became group texts where Amber always chimed in to make sure Ethan stayed on script. Even Mom, who tried to keep the peace, couldn't hide her unease. When they got engaged, I put my feelings aside. I congratulated them, even offered to help plan the wedding as a gift. Ethan lit up like a little boy, like the brother I remembered, and said, "Are you serious?" That would mean the world to me. I meant it. I wanted to be involved. I wanted to believe that maybe this wedding could heal whatever rift had quietly formed between us. But it wasn't long before I realized I wasn't planning the wedding. I was a placeholder until Amber could take full control. The first time it really hit me was during the venue tour. Amber asked me to meet her at the Ivy, a restored mansion on the outskirts of the city, known for its sweeping gardens and breathtaking ballroom. When I arrived, Amber was already there, laughing with the manager. She barely acknowledged me when I walked in. "Oh, Jessica," she said, feigning surprise. "We've already decided, but you're welcome to tag along." I felt the shift like a physical blow. Suddenly, I was no longer the trusted sister, the planner Ethan counted on. I was an accessory. Amber didn't need my help. She wanted me there to see that I wasn't needed. Still, I showed up. I reviewed contracts, handled permits, coordinated vendors, all behind the scenes. Even when Amber began taking credit for my work during family dinners, claiming, "I've been handling most of the wedding stuff," I swallowed my pride. I kept telling myself, "It's for Ethan." But then came the seating chart. It was 2 weeks before the wedding when I noticed it, sitting casually on the kitchen counter during a family brunch. I wasn't listed at the head table. I wasn't even near Ethan. I was at table 14, the kids' table. When I asked Ethan about it, he shrugged. Amber thought it would be fun. You know, lighten the mood. Fun. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing this wasn't just Amber being Amber. This was intentional. And worse, Ethan was letting it happen. So I made a choice. If they wanted to cast me as the outcast, I'd play the part. But on my own terms. I already had full back-end access to every major booking, every reservation, every vendor, because in the early days, Ethan had trusted me with everything. Amber never bothered to change it. She never considered that I might be more than the naive little sister playing party planner. I spent the next 2 weeks quietly adjusting plans. Not canceling, not yet, but shifting confirmations, arranging contingencies, preparing. I played along like the obedient sister. I smiled at Amber's digs, nodded along when Ethan pretended not to notice, and waited. Then today happened. They finally made their move. The missing chair, the laughter, the public humiliation. And now, as I stood hidden in the staff hallway, watching the minutes tick by, I knew I had everything I needed to rewrite this story. Not as the invisible sister, not as the doormat, but as the woman who would remind them that the people you step on are often the ones holding everything together. I spent the next hour moving through the venue like a ghost, unnoticed by most, tolerated by few. The wedding was in full swing. Amber's army of bridesmaids flitted about, giggling over last-minute touch-ups while the groomsmen downed expensive scotch like it was tap water. Ethan, my own brother, stood near the bar, smiling as if today was nothing more than a perfect fairy tale. And maybe it was. For them. But I knew better. I knew the cracks hidden beneath the marble and gold. I had laid the foundation myself. From the moment they gave me access to the wedding planning platform, I controlled every thread of this event. The venue, the caterer, the band, the transportation, even the delicate timeline that made luxury weddings look effortless. Amber thought she had taken over, but the reality? She only saw what I wanted her to see. I wasn't just the sister. I wasn't just the planner. I was the architect. And now, as I stood in the shadows, watching the pieces move, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The kind that only comes when you've already accepted what you have to do. I caught sight of Amber adjusting her veil in the giant floor-length mirror outside the bridal suite. She looked flawless, perfectly poised, a picture of elegance and cruelty wrapped into one. "You don't have to stay for the ceremony," she said casually when our eyes met in the reflection. "We wouldn't want you to feel out of place." No venom in her voice, just that insufferable sweetness that masked something far uglier underneath. I simply smiled and replied, "I wouldn't miss it." She blinked, briefly thrown off by my composure. But then the smirk returned. Amber always loved to think she was 2 steps ahead. I left her there, thinking she'd won. The ceremony unfolded like clockwork, but every second felt like a dagger. I stood near the back, not among family, not even among friends. No one dared speak to me beyond forced smiles and stiff nods. I noticed it all. The subtle glances, the barely whispered comments, the satisfied looks from Amber's parents as they saw me tucked away like some unwanted guest. And Ethan? He stood there under the archway, beaming as Amber walked down the aisle. I searched his face for some flicker of discomfort, some shadow of regret. There was none. When the officiant asked if anyone had any objections, I swear Amber's eyes flicked briefly toward me, daring me to speak. But I said nothing. I wasn't here to stop the wedding. I was here to let it happen. Later, during the cocktail hour, I wandered out to the garden, taking in the soft hum of conversations and the clinking of champagne flutes. Guests were already boasting about the evening ahead. The 5-course meal, the midnight dessert bar, the live jazz band flown in from New Orleans. But they didn't know what I knew. The vendor calls I had quietly made the night before, the updated contracts I signed personally, the contingency clauses I had prepared, just in case. They thought they were hours away from a flawless evening, but I knew the truth. Standing there beneath the string lights, watching my brother's world swirl around him, I felt a deep sadness. This wasn't just about a wedding. It wasn't just about a missing seat or a petty sister-in-law. This was about Ethan choosing them over me. Not once, but over and over. And yet, beneath the sadness, a spark of pride burned quietly. I wasn't walking away bitter. I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I had the power to decide how this story ended. And it wouldn't be the story Amber had planned. Back inside, the venue staff moved like clockwork, unaware that their evening would soon change. The dining room was immaculate. Every detail was picture-perfect. White linens, crystal glasses, custom menus embossed with Ethan and Amber's initials, all the result of months of work. My work. But none of them knew that the strings had already been cut. I took one final stroll past the head table where my missing seat should have been. I even smiled when Amber caught my eye again. This time, her smirk faltered. Only for a second, but it was enough. Because the clock was ticking. And when midnight came, when their perfect illusion crumbled, they would realize that the one person they thought didn't matter had been holding all the pieces all along. The first sign that something was wrong came just as the guests were beginning to take their seats. I was standing near the back of the room, watching from the shadows, when I noticed the maitre d' whispering frantically to Amber's wedding coordinator. A young woman Amber had hired last minute to replace me when she decided I wasn't professional enough for her wedding. The coordinator's expression shifted from calm to pale panic as the maitre d' handed her his phone and pointed toward the kitchen. Amber was too busy basking in compliments to notice, and Ethan, as always, was simply content to be along for the ride. The second sign came when the lights flickered and the band began quietly packing their instruments. Guests noticed, glancing around in confusion. The smooth jazz that had been playing moments ago was replaced by awkward silence. Amber finally noticed. "Why are they leaving?" she hissed at the coordinator, loud enough for a few guests to hear. But it wasn't just the band. Slowly, quietly, staff began stepping back, whispering nervously to one another. I could see it happening like the first domino in a carefully arranged line. No champagne was being poured. No servers were bringing out hors d'oeuvres. The kitchen doors remained shut. Amber's perfectly curated fantasy was beginning to crumble. I took a seat at the edge of the garden, watching the chaos unfold like it was a private show. Only I knew the truth. I had undone every thread. The venue? Booked under my company's guarantee. The caterers? Contractually bound to me. The band? My personal contacts. The floral arrangements, the transport, the late-night dessert bar? All under my control. 2 nights ago, I executed the contingency contracts. Non-payment? Breach of terms? Event paused. Indefinitely. It was all perfectly legal. All perfectly quiet. No one noticed until it was too late. The third sign came when Amber stormed into the staff hallway, voice sharp and brittle. "What is going on?" she snapped at the panicked coordinator. "Fix it." They said the payments were reversed," the coordinator stammered. "Nothing is confirmed, and the staff's contracts are frozen pending authorization." "What does that mean?" Amber demanded. "It means," I said calmly, stepping out from the shadows, "that your wedding is, technically, on hold." Amber spun around, eyes wide, lips parted in shock. "You?" she breathed. "You did this?" Before I could answer, Ethan appeared behind her, eyes flicking nervously between us. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd been standing on thin ice all along. "Jess, what's going on?" he asked, voice tight. I tilted my head slightly. Amber wanted me to help with the wedding. I helped. Amber's eyes narrowed. "You vindictive little—" "Careful," I interrupted softly. "You wouldn't want to cause a scene." She faltered. Public image was her obsession. And right now, every guest was looking around, murmuring as the room fell deeper into chaos. "You can't do this," Ethan said, his voice less angry and more disbelieving. "Jessica, this is my wedding." "And I spent months making sure it would be perfect," I replied evenly, "until you both decided I didn't belong." For the first time, Amber's mask cracked fully. "This is petty. You're ruining Ethan's day." Ethan's day? The same Ethan who had laughed when I was sent to the kids' table? The same Ethan who let Amber diminish me for over a year without ever stepping in? I let the silence hang heavy between us before finally saying, "Consider it a lesson." Amber grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him aside to whisper furiously. I saw it happening exactly as I had expected. Amber wasn't worried about Ethan's feelings. She wasn't worried about family. She was worried about optics, about the Caldwell guests whispering behind their wine glasses, about her father's business partners watching the bride lose control of her own wedding. From my spot in the hallway, I could already hear the growing discomfort inside the reception hall. The band was gone. The kitchen locked. The servers vanished. Vendors were now gathering in the parking lot, confused but obedient to the revised contracts. All eyes would soon turn toward Amber and Ethan. No food, no music, no event. Just the lingering question in everyone's mind. What happened? I turned to walk away, leaving them in the mess they created, but not before adding softly, "Oh, and Ethan? Remember when you said I was just overreacting? Still think so?" I didn't wait for a response. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt nothing but quiet satisfaction. Not triumph, not revenge, just clarity. They had underestimated me, but I was never the extra. I was the foundation. The murmur of confusion grew louder as I stepped outside into the cool evening air. I could still hear the scattered clinking of glasses inside, but the atmosphere had shifted completely. What was once a flawless, elegant celebration now felt like an abandoned stage where the performers had fled. I stood beneath the glow of the garden's string lights, watching through the grand windows as guests began realizing that something was wrong. The servers were gone. The band's corner was empty. No champagne flowed. No food appeared. Only the brittle silence of expectations unmet. Amber's mother was the first to stand, adjusting her pearl necklace nervously as she whispered to one of the guests. Ethan's groomsmen, ever clueless, tried to shrug it off, but even they couldn't hide their unease. The final act had begun. I didn't have to wait long. The doors flew open and Amber stormed out, heels clicking furiously against the stone path, Ethan trailing helplessly behind her. "Jessica," Amber hissed, lowering her voice just enough to keep it from echoing through the garden. "Fix this, right now." Ethan's eyes darted toward the guests who had followed them outside, curious, their glasses still half full, their conversations now focused entirely on the bride's unraveling composure. I tilted my head. "Fix what?" "The vendors followed the contracts. You both signed off on me handling everything, remember?" "Of course you wouldn't, because neither of you bothered to check." Amber's nostrils flared. "We trusted you." Ethan winced. Amber's choice of words wasn't lost on him. He knew. We all knew. They hadn't trusted me. They had used me until they didn't need me anymore. "You mean you used me?" I corrected calmly. "Big difference." Amber was fuming, but Ethan looked ashamed. For the first time all day, the reality of what he had allowed finally showed on his face. His mouth opened as if to say something, but nothing came. He glanced back at the watching guests, realizing this scene couldn't be swept under a rug. Amber tried again, her voice trembling. "You're ruining everything. My parents, their friends, our friends, are all inside wondering where the food is, where the music is. You think this makes you look strong? You look pathetic." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You made sure there wasn't a seat for me tonight. You laughed. You belittled me in front of everyone. And Ethan? He let you." Ethan's eyes dropped to the ground, unable to meet mine. Amber whispered harshly, "So what? You just thought you'd sabotage your own brother's wedding? What kind of person does that?" I breathed deeply, keeping my composure intact. The kind who's finally done begging to be treated like family. More guests trickled into the garden now, curiosity winning over etiquette. I could see Ethan's boss, a family friend, and even Aunt Marie, who rarely left the buffet table at any event, watching from the side. The whispers started swirling fast. "You planned all this?" Ethan asked, eyes wide. "No," I said truthfully. "I planned the wedding you asked me to plan. Then, when I realized I wasn't part of it anymore, when Amber made sure I wasn't even welcome, I simply stopped protecting it." Amber stepped forward, but Ethan held up a hand, stopping her. His voice, quieter now, cracked slightly. "You could have told me." "Told you what?" I asked. "That your fiancé was planning to humiliate me? That you were too busy looking the other way to see it? You would have brushed it off like you always did." I saw it then. The collapse. Not just of the wedding, but of the story Ethan had been telling himself. That Amber was just strong-willed, that the family would work itself out, that his sister would always be there no matter how they treated her. By now, almost every guest was outside. No music, no dinner, no first dance. Just silence and the uncomfortable realization that something big had just happened. "I'm not doing this here," Amber snapped, tugging at Ethan's sleeve. "Inside. Now." But Ethan didn't move. He looked around at the people gathered, the pity in some eyes, the judgment in others. And finally, his gaze returned to me. Not as his sister who was overreacting, but as the person who had always been there, quietly holding everything together. "Jess." His voice cracked. I shook my head. "Don't. It's too late." I turned and walked away, leaving them standing beneath the string lights, surrounded by whispers and unfinished toasts. I didn't need to say anything more. They would feel it long after tonight. The cost of turning family into an afterthought. And the night wasn't even over yet. The night air felt colder as I walked away from the venue, leaving behind the crumbling remains of a wedding that was never meant for me, I didn't rush. I didn't have to. I knew that inside, Amber was scrambling to save face while Ethan stood frozen, watching everything he thought was untouchable unravel before his eyes. As I reached the small parking lot tucked behind the garden, I allowed myself one deep breath. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't holding it all together for someone else. I had nothing to prove to Amber, nothing to salvage with Ethan, nothing left to lose. And strangely, it felt like freedom. I sat in my car for a while, staring out at the glowing windows of the venue. From this distance, the murmurs of the guests had faded, but I could imagine the chaos inside. Vendors would be explaining that payments had been voided. The caterers would be quietly packing up. The band would already be halfway down the highway. The clock had struck midnight. The grand wedding that Amber had designed to impress, to cement her position, to put me in my place, was officially over before the main course had even been served. But it wasn't just about the wedding, and it never had been. The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages. First from Mom, who had pieced together what had happened faster than most. "I hope you're okay. Call me when you're ready." Then from a few distant relatives who hadn't dared to speak up last night, but knew exactly why I did what I did. "You didn't deserve any of that." And then came Ethan. Dozens of texts. Some angry, some confused, some almost sounding like the brother I remembered. But it was the voicemail, the one he left at 3:13 a.m., that told me everything. "Jess, please. I messed up. I should have stopped it. I should have done something. You were right. Amber's furious, but that's not the point. I was wrong. Please just call me." I played it twice. And for the first time in a long while, I cried. Not out of sadness, but out of release. 2 days later, I met Ethan at a small coffee shop we used to visit after Dad's chemo appointments. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders hunched forward like the weight of it all had finally landed. We sat in silence for a moment before he finally said, "You were right." I stirred my coffee slowly. "About what?" "All of it," he admitted. "Amber, the wedding, everything. I let her treat you like you were nothing. I let all of them." The apology I never thought I'd hear. "I thought you'd always be there," he continued. "No matter how bad it got. No matter how much I looked the other way." I studied him carefully. For the first time since the engagement, he wasn't hiding behind excuses. There was no Amber to speak for him. No parents whispering about family image. Just Ethan, my brother. "That's the thing, Ethan," I said quietly. "I would have been, but there's only so much someone can take." He nodded, tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. "I'm sorry." And maybe in that moment I could have unloaded everything. The resentment, the disappointment, the years of being dismissed and sidelined. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I didn't need to. I had already let it go. The wedding became a whispered legend within our social circles. Not just because it fell apart, but because no one could quite explain how. Amber, of course, spun her version, blaming vendor incompetence and unforeseen issues. But the truth lingered behind every raised eyebrow and knowing glance. In the weeks that followed, I rebuilt quietly. Not just my relationship with Ethan, which, to his credit, he worked hard to repair, but also myself. I realized I had been holding on to the hope of belonging, of being part of something that didn't want me. I spent years trying to fit into a version of family that only existed if I stayed small and silent. I was done with that. 1 year later, I was standing in the gardens of a different venue, clipboard in hand, overseeing the final touches of another wedding. One where I wasn't an afterthought, but the respected professional I'd always been. As the bride hugged me in gratitude, I realized the lesson I had learned that night wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about getting even. It was about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone, not even the people you love most, make you forget it.